Hey guys, welcome. It's Dr. Allison Wiltz and Arturo Dominguez, friends that are about to get into a really cool conversation. So thank you for joining. We're both new to this, but I'm more new. So
Yeah.
be gentle with me. I normally don't I normally don't just like pop up online and stuff like that. I do pop up online, but not physically. So trying to change that. You're gonna be seeing me on Substack more. You're gonna see me posting on Substack more and engaging with some of my favorites is Arturo Dominguez, and so I'll let him introduce himself.
Well, I'm Arturo Dominguez. I'm an independent journalist. I focus on like decolonized type of journalism, not centering white people and white things. Try to focus on all kinds of stuff regarding like racial justice, the intersection of politics and race, things like that. Same wheelhouse as you, so to speak. So yeah,
Thank
looking forward to this.
And yeah, for those who don't know, I'm a writer and scholar. I write and publish my own stuff. I've written over 1,000 essays so far on race, and I recently got my PhD in January, so I'm really excited about that. Uh, and I'm also someone who bakes things and is about to start like a family business baking things. But what we're here today to do is talk about a hot topic. Here we have a Black woman and a Cuban man, and we want to talk about how our communities could come together. This is not a debate where we're going to rip each other apart because we know each other very well and we're
Right.
very much aligned. But we do want to talk about some misconceptions in both of our communities and talk about like how we can build bridges together. I do a little bit on Twitter, but it's a very hateful environment, hoping maybe we could do something different here. Okay? So, with that being said, should you start or should I start with like providing information on like the basis of what's going on?
Well, one issue that I'd like to tackle in this conversation is I see, we Latinos, right? We have our races, right? Just like white people, maybe not as many, but they're substantial enough we have to deal with. But I see a lot of them saying, like I see it on threads more than anywhere, where they say that Latinos are on their own with these ICE raids, and they're trying to suggest like black people aren't coming to help us, things like that. And the way I see it, one, we shouldn't be demanding anybody come help us or do anything, right?
Right.
And two, you really just have to look around because I see a lot of black folks, my house, right? There's a lot of black people in my
Right.
house, right? A lot of them are immigrants too, but I know a lot of black people too, and they're just all like, this ICE shit is just crazy. And, personal conversations one on one, and they get pretty deep. And then, if you look online and at the protests and things like that, there are a ton of black people speaking up for us, and a lot of them are addressing another thing that people, mostly white America, keeps overlooking is the impact these ICE raids are having on the black community too. You see Latinos on the news, right? And it's obvious that we're the primary target right now. Even the children of immigrants. But, there's the issue, with Haitians and Congolese and all kinds of Africans, they're racial profiling, right? So,
Right.
in Dallas, for example, I was having this conversation with somebody. Dallas has one of the largest, if not the largest, Congolese population in the country. Do you think ICE really is going to care or pay attention or listen for accents when they come through a neighborhood where they know there's a lot of, Congolese? They're just going to go after black people. They don't care.
Right.
That like what you see in LA, you know, and in Houston and stuff, they're most primarily targeting Latino communities, but like in Houston, and I'm sure it's like this in LA, but like in the third ward, it's a mix, so um it creates a tense situation, when you already nationally, everybody pretty much has a general distrust of cops, even the Blue Lives Matter people, right? They hate getting tickets, they hate all that stuff. But then when you got feds coming in there wearing masks, no ID, military vehicles, weapons like military weapons, it can be scary.
Right.
It's scary enough before this when ICE was in the neighborhood, but now it's even worse. And it just the impacts it has across different minority communities, particularly Latino and Black communities, um, is there, and, like, I think a lot of people are overlooking that.
Absolutely. I would say one of the things I feel like is a common misconception is that Black people are not affected by the ICE raids. We
Right,
absolutely are. Um, I was looking it up earlier. There are millions, absolutely millions of Black immigrants in this country. Um, and one of the problems I feel like is there's this whole movement among Black Americans that are actually engaging in xenophobia. So just like how you have racism in your community, we have xenophobia in our community, and there are some Black people that are saying, "This is not my fight. I don't want anything to do with this." And
right,
so some of the Latinos are responding to that. It's like it almost feels like the wrong people are responding to the wrong things because there are Black people saying, "This isn't my fight," but there's also Black people there on the front lines. And there's also Latinos saying, "We don't care what happens to Black people." And then there's also Afro Latinos who are Black,
right,
and there are also Latinos that are not Afro Latino, but actually care about Black people, and their voices are being like overlooked. And what's kind of coming out to the forefront is a lot of hatred. And I feel like it's a distraction because the true threat is white supremacy. Before there were ICE raids, Black people in New Orleans were subjected to jump out boys. Those are police officers
right,
that they're come out and they're wearing common clothes and they don't give you any type of warning. It's absolutely terrifying, and they just go after and pin up Black people and arrest us and hurt us and that sort of thing. And also to your point, in these Black and brown communities, people are not gonna like they're not gonna even want to see ID. They're just grabbing people because they have
right.
grabbed people that are Americans, and they didn't give them a chance to show their paperwork. They just said, "You know what? I'm looking at you, and I don't know what you are," and it's like it goes to this idea of them thinking that to be American you have to be white, or for you to have rights you have to be white, which is really disturbing.
Right, it made me you just made me think of this Iranian guy recently who was a US citizen born here, told him he's a US citizen, and they're like, "That doesn't matter anymore." And I was like, "There you have it," like, "You're brown, we don't care." And, Pablo, he's up at the Capitol, Pablo Manriquez. The other day, he was posting videos on Twitter, and he was asking, lawmakers, particularly senators, Republican senators, if they cared that US citizens were being snatched up by ICE, and one that stuck out to me was Tommy Tuberville, whatever. He said that basically, "Don't hang around illegals and you won't get rounded up." And I took that as, well, if you're in a mixed status family, you're
Yeah,
fucked.
what do you
Like,
do? They're
what
pretty
are you
much
supposed
telling
to
you to
do?
abandon your family.
Right, right. So, like, we're not necessarily a mixed status family. I mean, my extended family maybe, but, like, my parents are immigrants. We're children of immigrants. So, there's that. They're talking about targeting people for seemingly random stuff to try to take their citizenship away.
Remember what he's done
And
about Rosie O'Donnell. Rosie O
right,
so that scared me because I'm like, well, if a white woman who is a citizen and has family, has been here for a couple of generations, I found that disturbing because of a white woman. And I understand Trump says outlandish things. He can't always do the things that he tries to do. But it was disturbing that to me that because they had a political disagreement, he was like,
right,
"Oh, let me go ahead and try to snatch your citizenship." And I'm like, well, if they could do that to a white woman, then the FBA and ADOS people who are saying, this doesn't apply to us. I'm like, well, if they can snatch a white woman, then Black people are not safe. And also there's this
right,
weird, it's almost like people are like the news is has such a big plays such a big role in what we talk about. People see a lot of Latinos being jammed up. But before all of these ICE raids, if you look up the statistics, they show that actually Black immigrants are the number one that are deported, and they're
right,
number one put in solitary confinement. And like for
right,
those of y'all that study sociology, psychology, you would know that that's a form of torture. And so when you think about when people say, "Oh, I don't care about that. That's not my fight," and it's like in reality, anytime human rights are being violated, that is our problem. And it would be nice if they knew that it also does impact Black people. Being anti-immigrant ultimately become it's anti, it's anti-human, because ultimately, what are we when we leave our where we're from? After Katrina 20 years ago, when they called us refugees, I was a senior in high school, and they were calling us refugees and all type of bad things because they didn't think that we belonged there. And it's like, well, we were Americans, but it didn't matter because they saw us as predominantly Black and we needed help and they didn't like us. It was a horrible
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah, and it's something, if I'm not mistaken, is only like 5% of the undocumented population in the country is Black, like Afro,
Right.
whatever they may be. But like almost 21% account are the ones that are apprehended and taken into custody and thrown in a detention center. And like you were saying, they're more than likely that's who they're gonna throw in solitary, but they also hold them longer because,
Right.
there are limits to how long they can hold people in a detention facility in the process of deportation, but they push that number because it's profit. They're making money off that person. They get paid for each head in that facility, especially private prisons. And so they keep them as long as possible so they can generate more revenue. And it's a process. You have to arrange flights and all this stuff, but it doesn't take a month and a half or something like that, 60 days to get somebody out of the country.
And they're
Um,
sending them
it,
to countries that are not the countries they're
right,
from. Like that Black man, he never went to Jamaica a day in his life. And he was born on a US base in Germany. His dad was a naturalized American citizen. He was born in Jamaica but became a naturalized citizen, joined the army, and his son was born while he was overseas. And he was a citizen. He grew up in Texas. He had a birth certificate, social, all these
right,
things. And then all of a sudden, Trump's like, "You're not a citizen. Get out and go to Jamaica, a place you never went in your life." I'm like, that sounds terrifying. The idea of, because of your parents, even though they were Americans, just because they happened to be born somewhere else. Like, he's completely ignoring the 14th Amendment, and the Supreme Court is allowing him to do that.
right. The Supreme Court, the whole kicking the can down the road type thing, like ruling on the nationwide injunctions related to the 14th Amendment challenge, instead of just ruling on the 14th Amendment,
Why?
just leaves the window open for Trump to continue to do this. And, there's no telling when they're going to make a decision on it. And you, I'm pretty sure they're going to rule that the 14th Amendment's solid, birthright citizenship is solid, but you never know. You never know with this
I
court.
don't trust
And
them. And
I
I
don't
feel
either.
like, and what's just so disturbing is by the time we kind of find out that it's kind of too dangerous, it may be too late to make arrangements.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy thing, is like, it's not even, this place isn't even safe for citizens that are of colors. Like, so it's like, it's definitely not safe for immigrants, but it's not safe for any of us. And it's like I always say, my boyfriend is he's Black, but some of his heritage is Chittimacha. And you can kind of see it. You've seen those pictures of him where he kind of
Right.
favors
Right.
indigenous people in his family. And he's an electrician, and he works with people that are Latino and people that are immigrants and people that are not citizens. And I always tell him my biggest fear is that they come on the job site and they round up everyone. And you look ambiguous enough to where they might round
Right.
you up. So I'm always telling him, carry your ID, carry your passport, this, that, the other. But even then, what if it just doesn't matter? And it's just like,
Right.
then they're sending people to different places. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, there's those military veterans, they show their military ID and ICE was like, "Oh, that's fake." And they take them in anyway. They rounded up a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans up in, I don't know, Boston, up in the Northeast somewhere about a month or 2 ago, like a 20 or 30 of them, and they're all like, "Hey, we're US citizens, we're Puerto Rican, that doesn't matter." And they take them in anyway. And it's not until
It's
they hold
about
them in
race and
there.
ethnicity. It's about ethnic
Right,
cleansing. We need to start kind of, I feel like, as progressives and as radicals, we need to start using the language to say what it is and say, this is an ethnic cleansing policies. The alligator Alcatraz, the inhumane conditions that immigrants are being, that's what Hitler did. And I didn't know that until a couple of years ago when I really started studying it, is that I didn't realize that Hitler was sending people to concentration camps outside of Germany. Growing
Yeah.
up, I just thought all of this happened in Germany. And in reality, he was sending, like, for example, to Poland, and
Mhm.
certain areas that they controlled, they were starting concentration camps there and, expanding this bigoted regime. And I feel like that's what I see Trump doing when I see him making partnerships with and sending an immigrant who's like, say, from, Honduras and sending them to Guatemala. Like, certain things like that's not acceptable. That's
Right.
not sending them home. You're creating a humanitarian disaster, an international humanitarian disaster. And what's so shameful about it is we have a need for immigrants here. When our city was destroyed from Katrina, white people didn't help rebuild this city.
Yeah.
Maybe Brad Pitt and Angelina came down for a few days. Like, there were some white people, but mostly it was Black people who needed the jobs that couldn't help but to help build a city. And it was primarily people that were immigrants. And a lot of them, we didn't care if they were citizens or
Right.
not. They were there and they was willing to help us. And they did it quickly,
Right.
and like literally, they put stucco on my mom's house in one day. One day. We came back the next day and I was absolutely floored. I said, "This looks beautiful." And even 20 years later, my mom's house still looks good because of
Right.
the work that they did and the whole community. And, to see them being, and I live in an area where there's like a lot of immigrants around me. I've seen the population grow over time because originally I used to see them because I live right by a Lowe's and my man's in the construction industry. And they have
Right.
like a food truck that used to be over there. And I used to go over there sometimes to get some food. When I tell you over the past couple of years, it went from one food truck to like five food trucks all together. To where I'm thinking, when I get my food truck, I'm probably gonna go over there by them. Now the food trucks are gone. I don't know
Yeah.
what happened to the people. I don't know what happened to them. I still see some of them around, but I definitely see the presence has changed. I used to also go to a free clinic called Luke's House, and it's one of the only free clinics in New Orleans. And it's kind of cool because you don't have to go to the hospital, it's free. They became primarily Latino, and they actually were sending us text messages and saying that the clinic was shut down and was not giving any notice. And I think I know why, and it's because they didn't want ICE to kind of target that facility and prey upon people that are trying to get their kids vaccinated for school and get like help for having a cold and stuff. Like, they didn't want it to be a place where they were a magnet for that. But it's really unfortunate because they used to do all type of resources for the community. They did fairs where they gave away school supplies. They give people free healthcare, and they even give you like a little signed paper that they give you, where on most local pharmacies you could get free medicine. So
Oh, wow.
absolutely great clinic, and I just hope that somehow they're willing to or able to
Okay.
continue those services somehow, some way.
Yeah, there's a lot of those resources, like, so, like, in Texas, the immigrant thing was never really a big deal till recently, right? Because we have all the resources along the border. There's a lot of nonprofits. The Catholic Church does a lot of work to help migrants and, get them where they're going and things like that. And a lot of that stuff's shutting down for the same reason because, they're magnets for ICE. And, some of them are losing government funding, because they're taking everything away. Um, and, they get sued by the state of Texas, supposedly. I think it was Dan Patrick was trying to accuse them of trafficking migrants, basically being like coyotes. And like, they're not helping them get across, they're helping them after they get released from Border Patrol. So, it's just a weird thing, where like we're living in a time where, everybody thinks every immigrant's illegal. Nobody understands that once Border Patrol releases somebody, they're no longer illegal. Undocumented doesn't mean criminal, doesn't mean illegal,
Well, the
so
illegal stuff is crazy anyway. The illegal term is crazy anyway
right.
because it's like white people used to say that, and I say this like my second great grandfather was born a slave. And he was not considered a person. He was considered
Yeah.
property when he was born. He wasn't considered a citizen. In fact, Dred Scott in 1856 said that anyone of African descent could never be a citizen as determined in the Constitution. And so they were considered property. they literally, we had to fight an entire war for Black people to be considered citizens. And so I think it's really dangerous the way as society treats like legality as something that's holy, when really it's just the decisions that we make together, ideally, but in reality ended up being the
Right.
decisions that the most powerful people make. And so just because white people back then said Black people weren't citizens, we were property, that didn't make it true, and I think it's the same thing
Right.
for people that they call illegal. It's like, yeah, you might not have status, you might not have a protective status that provides you protections, but it's just unfortunate that that gap exists. Like I think almost like calling it almost like it's like the difference between saying like slave and enslaved. It's like
Right.
illegal, versus like, are you legal or you just do not have status under this white supremacist system?
Right. Like
Yeah.
I've adopted a different like verbal strategy with this, and I basically use the guidance provided by the Constitution. So there's a difference between persons and citizens, right? Citizens and non-citizens. And that's it. That's what I use. Everything
Right.
else, everything else is just bullshit.
That's
I
true.
mean, right? So even, say the Indian immigrant working in the tech sector who, has to wait 120 years for a green card because that's how bad the
Right.
backlog is, right? They're a non-citizen just like Juan who just came across the border,
Bingo.
they might have a different status or a different path to, residency and citizenship, but they're still, according to the Constitution, you're either a non-citizen or a citizen. And, the person's part of the Constitution protects everybody, including non-citizens, and the citizen part protects citizens, so, you have to be a citizen to vote, things like that. That's outlined pretty clearly in the Constitution. So I think, there's all this debate about use undocumented, don't use illegal. I just, you know what? I'm not even messing with any of that because
Right. Just
now,
citizen or not citizen, because it doesn't matter
right.
how or why you're not a citizen. You just are or aren't.
Well,
But either way, we're people.
right. And to MAGA, when you say undocumented, they say that's you're illegal. Undocumented means you don't have papers, so you must
Right.
be illegal. Right. So,
That's their
you
logic.
know, one of my favorite things is
I think we need to get our political power back up, because ultimately we outnumber them. They're 30% of the population and they're just
yeah,
taking up too much space. And I do want to address something somebody said. They're like, look at Condoleezza Rice, never use race to get ahead. She believed in education and merit. So, first of all, let me address this. This may not be the space for you, first and foremost. We believe in being pro Black. We believe in being pro people of color.
yeah,
That's us. First of all. Second of all, I have a PhD and I never benefited from a diversity program. I actually had graduated high school with a 3.5, graduated my bachelor's with over a 3.7, graduated my master's with a 3.5, and graduated my PhD with a 4.0. So, unfortunately for that theory, I have developed everything based off my merit. The same thing as far as my mom being a lawyer. She graduated Tulane Law School, summa cum laude. So, I mean, technically, Black people are very hardworking, and us talking about race is because of racism. Secondly, when it comes to merit, merit is a myth in American society. If working hard was enough to get us everything we needed, Black people would be the most wealthy racial group in the United States. Us and Indigenous people, if it was about just hard work alone. But the truth of the matter is, Black people are paid less for performing the same jobs as white people.
right,
So look up statistically. If you look up, matter of fact, just put in quote, myth of meritocracy, and look up that, because that's kind of like, and I hate to say it that way, but it's like Henry Clark said, like, I'll debate my equals to everyone else I teach. And that's a situation where we just have to teach people and keep it moving,
right,
because we're actually kind of beyond the point where we're falling victim to legitimizing myths. Ultimately, Black and Latino people, and a lot of people don't know this when it comes to police brutality. After Black men, Latino men are the second largest group that is killed by police. So what we're trying to do here is we're not doing the white supremacist stuff where they're debating whether or not our needs are valid. What we're doing here is building on the fact that we already know our needs are valid, and that
right,
we're entangled in this fight together. And I would say on the Black end, some of the confusion I'm seeing is a lot of people feel like it's an either or. They think if they help immigrants, that somehow that's going to take away from them just focusing on themselves. And I work with Latinos like such as yourself, Arturo, and you support reparations. So I've
Right.
never had to give up the things that I want to work with you and support you in the things that your people need. And so I feel like we need more of that, more people understanding that don't take the negative comment you heard from that one person and kind of extrapolate to an entire group. That's not how science works. In science, what we do and what I did in my research is I take a poll, and you try to learn more about human behavior by asking people questions. And interestingly, do you know what my research found, Neo? What my research actually found is that colorblind racism was the factor that was most likely to predict resistance to racial equity programs, meaning that even though we typically go after people who just hardcore racist as the wall that's holding us back, what my research actually showed was that colorblind racism is just as bad, if not more serious of a factor holding us back. So that's why I really can't entertain that much. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify for anybody that just kind of reading this what it means, what are we talking about? We're not talking about our race as a detriment to one another. We're talking about our race as a positive as far as being unity. And Latinos, yay, yay, will be a majority in this country.
Right.
And so as a Black person, I love working with Black people, with Latino people who love Black people, because together we can form a coalition and get all of the things we need to get done. We don't have to live under the foot of white supremacy if we work together. But there's a lot of people interested in trying to separate us. And that's kind of what motivated us to do this kind of talk in the first place.
Right, right. And I mean, that's kind of what motivated us to start working together years ago, you know? So, we found commonality in a lot of what we were saying. And it was really easy to build a community because there were so many of us that just weren't being heard. And, lifting each other up and upholding each other and supporting each other, that made such a huge difference in a lot of our lives. And, that speaks volumes. Like we wouldn't have gotten that anywhere else. I tried
The
joining writers
support, the
through.
support we got, that's why I
Right.
feel like I was able to find my voice more as a writer, because
Absolutely, right. Because
working with y'all.
we found a lot of commonality, with each other. That's where I met Marlon. We just did that live a couple days ago. Everybody loves it when me and Marlon get together. Brian Gilmore's here,
Yeah.
Contessa's here, like,
My
there's a bunch of
favorite
us here.
peoples.
Right,
That's
right.
that's what made me come. Y'all make me come places because y'all make it fun. But y'all did teach me, y'all taught me to troll. And so when I'm on Twitter, I'm not gonna lie, y'all, that is so funny trolling them. They get so mad. I can just say
Yeah.
black, 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 yo. And they're just gonna, like, the white supremacists are gonna be like, ah.
Right, yeah. I swear, you just say, "I love being Black," and they lose their minds, you know what I mean? And it's
Like,
just like,
this
dude,
is
like,
going
yeah.
viral. And I'm like, no, I'll look at my phone like, why is this going viral? When I'm just literally just saying this simple stuff. I'll be like, Thomas Jefferson, he raped that girl. And they'll be like, you hate us. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
They're so like
right.
adverse to facts. Like,
Right, when I bring up, Benjamin Franklin's xenophobia, right, and I point out how they're literally just saying the same things Benjamin Franklin said 250, 300 years ago. He was worried about white people going extinct because of Germans. He thought
bingo.
the Germanization of Pennsylvania, and I bring that up, and I'm like, "Dude, you guys are saying the same stuff, and y'all are still here. 250 years ago, Benjamin Franklin thought y'all were gonna be extinct. Y'all are still here. What the fuck are you worried about?" Man, they lose their shit. They lose their shit.
In the
And
newspapers, there's old newspapers in Louisiana, they were writing about how they didn't want Louisiana to become Americanized. They felt like we want to speak
right?
Creole, we want to speak French. We
Mhm.
don't want, so like a lot of them, they wouldn't even teach their kids English because they're like, nah, we don't want them to speak English. We don't want them to become like them. And then it crossed the line where it was like, okay, now we need to hurry up and abandon this Creole stuff. We need to be American. We need to blend in with other Americans, because they were worried that that people in New Orleans and Louisiana would never be seen as true Americans because of how weird we were. We were owned by the Spanish, owned by the French. And by the time the Americans got us, we were like, what are you saying? Buku?
Yeah,
We like we like, we don't even know what you're talking about.
right.
you know? And also, there was an interesting story I found in this book that I don't tell the library. I gotta return it, but it's called Creoles of Color in New Orleans. And one of the interesting things I found out about here is Napoleon Bonaparte. He lied. He told the light skinned Creole people in Louisiana. He said, you will always have your separate designation. You'll have your rights. And the crazy part is, it was such a lot. The Americans came in there and they were called white leaguers. They went into the little girls' classroom, because at the time they had some Creole children going to school with white children. And this is when segregation began. They literally had a
Right.
list and called them by name. Each one of you not white, you not white, you get your ass up. And they, in the book they talk about how the little girls was crying. They was like, whoa, whoa. And they walked their ass right to the black side. Y'all, from here on out, you're black.
Yeah.
Napoleon lied.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what's weird too, because before, like, I hate to say before the Latino population was so big, because in the Southwest it's always been big. But, race was such a black and white thing in this country for the longest time. And when the Latino population really started to grow, there was an issue of, who's black and who's white, because the laws were pretty black and white. So, Latinos tried to come across as white.
Differently. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, there was all these lawsuits, about segregated schools and stuff. And, you know, part of that lawsuit was used in Brown versus Board, to finally eliminate desegregation in schools. And I think when you look at that history, and I see a lot of the ADOS and FBA, and
They
I
make
agree
me
with.
so mad
Right. Yeah,
because
I agree with a lot of their platform. I have
except
to
for the
call.
xenophobia. Like, the only
Right.
thing they get wrong is they're hating immigrants. Like, everything else is right. Reparations, right. You understand it. Racism is systemic, right. You understand we have to stick together, right. You
Right.
understand why you the problem, check. And it's like, then somehow they just picked up this one straight point. And the saddest part for me is, it's like, this is my ancestry. And so it's like, here we have
Yeah.
two groups that didn't exist when I was born. Two new groups that are named with the same like lineage as me, but like are espousing hatred. And it pisses me off because it's like, well, obviously, this has to be some white supremacist like psych op stuff, because is it that they're taking the black people that are conscious enough to be pro black and
Right.
making them hateful against the immigrants so that they cannot be useful to the coalition. So that means if they believe, all this about immigrants, they're going to be they're not going to support a ticket that's going to support immigrants. And
Right.
ironically, the only type of, they don't seem to understand that our enemies are very focused about what the threat is. Like, Damsky, this student in Florida, he won a competition for writing this paper.
Oh
And in
yeah.
the paper, he was espousing hatred against black people and immigrants. And his plan is this. And he actually got this from taking a law class that from a judge that Donald Trump appointed. And in the paper, Damsky writes about how they want to get rid of the 14th and 15th Amendment. For those who don't know, the 14th Amendment, that's due process, that's either equal protection clause and birthright citizenship, and 15th Amendment gives black men the equal right to vote. So anytime someone's saying, I want to get rid of the 14th and 15th Amendment, they're coming after immigrants and black people, not just one or the other. But what happens when you've convinced so many black people that, hey, until they get to the 15th Amendment, don't pay attention? And that's not smart, because the
Right.
same political party that would get rid of the 14th would get rid of the 15th. And
Right.
if black men don't have the right to vote as a black woman, I sure, like, where's the
Right.
basis to extend the rights to me if they don't have it? And so I try to get people to understand that, but a lot of them are just like, no, this doesn't pertain to me. And they'll call me all types of names, tether, shield, blah, blee, blah. And in reality, I work for myself. A lot of them don't. Like, a lot
Right.
of them, they work for white people, or, I feel like this, like, if we're going to be calling each other names, like, I'm definitely not the one to call that for, because I work for myself. I've been working for myself for the past 5.5 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't answer
Right.
to anyone. And you notice I wake up and I write what I want to write.
Right. And I'm that way too. A lot of what you were just saying right there is what the thing is with. It's the same thing I tell Latinos, right? That start to get all anti-immigrant. They've been here a generation or two, and we always say this: a Latino immigrant's worst enemy is another Latino with papers, and it's true. So you turn these Latinos into anti-immigrant people, and they start taking sides with white supremacists. What they seem to be forgetting, just like the ADOS and the FBA people, is the white supremacist doesn't give a damn. He hate he hates all y'all just like he hates
Mhm.
all of us.
Facts.
And right, so you may take sides with them, you may repeat what they say, and you think it makes sense, even though it doesn't. Eventually, they're gonna turn on you, and
Facts.
we're seeing that, like, we saw it happen to Enrique Tarrio, right? Henry, that's his real name. I like to call him Henry because he hates it. Um, but, so we saw it happen to Henry, and, they turned on him, right? And then the minute everybody starts getting arrested, they start blaming him, talk about he was talking to the feds. He's been an informant for the feds before. So, now that he's out of
That-
jail, he's still trying to be that guy, but the leadership council of the Proud Boys doesn't want a black dude at the top anymore. They want
Of
him out.
course not.
We're done, right? They were just
They
using
didn't
him
want that to
before.
begin with.
Right. And so, you see it happen to him, and you're seeing it happen to Latinos everywhere. You
Yeah.
know,
And
like
it happened to
all
indigenous people before. Like they got
yeah,
some indigenous people. They became slave owners, and the five civilized nations joined with the Confederacy. And they were told a lie that if you help us like maintain slavery and if you own slaves, we'll spare you. And that wasn't
right,
true because
right,
we saw what happened with the Trail of Tears. They only told them like assimilation is like a carrot they're dangling. And that's what I wish that we had like a welcome committee of black and brown people to where when immigrants do come to be like, listen, I know you've been told a lot of lies to pass this little citizenship test, but now it's time for us to talk real talk.
right,
Real
right. Because
real talk about what's going on
if
here because there a lot of people come and I feel like they're being misinformed.
yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at the history and you see what they did to the five tribes, you see um, Tulsa, you see, all the uprisings, right? They call them race riots, but we all know better than that. All those uprisings through history and, bombing the neighborhood in Philadelphia, like if they'll go to that level,
Right.
and historically, you can go back really far, but bombing the Philadelphia neighborhood is recent. Um, you know, and you see these ICE agents and they come into a neighborhood and they're just like a lynch mob. I mean, they're
They
just as
are
rowdy. They don't
exactly like
care,
that.
right? And like I've talked to a couple of cops, right? And I can never quote them because they're always off the record. They don't want to, and I can respect that, because that's going to put them at risk. But I've talked to several of them who have heard ICE agents say that they're ready to go loud. And I keep talking about this because a lot of people don't understand that go loud means open fire. They're ready to start shooting people. And that's a scary thought. And when you have cops that are disturbed by this, that says a lot because most cops are pretty
Right.
trigger happy.
And then
So
they just got away with killing Breonna Taylor where the prosecutors are only asking that the cop
I
serves
can't
a
believe that.
day. I'm like writing
Day.
about that, but it's hard to write about. But the problem is if they're saying that a black woman only does you only have to sit one day in jail for killing a black woman. That means there's a target on all of our heads.
Right.
And that's what people don't
Right.
understand is it's like the reason why you like ICE and the police are two sides of the same coin. One of them deals with domestic matters, the other one deals with what they feel like is foreign, trying to remove people who are foreign. But it's the same concept. They both want us to be put in confinement, institutionalized, hurt,
Right.
potentially killing us if it suits their fancy. Um, them being masked, I know for sure that I would probably get into a horrible altercation with one of them because I've been assaulted before and I'm not going anywhere with somebody that's wearing a mask. Absolutely
Right.
not. So
Yeah.
we gonna have to just handle it in court because I'm
Right.
not gonna get. I told myself a long time ago as a woman, I said I'm not going to nobody's trunk. I'm not going with nobody that's masked. Hell no. And that's why my
Right.
heart goes out to people that they're just like snatching. One of my friends, she works in a restaurant And she told me something that was very disturbing. This one girl that the ICE confiscated, they put her in the back of a van, and the thing that they put her in, she said looked like a cage in the back. And that was
Yeah.
disturbing to me because in my mind I'm thinking that that sounded more like a kennel, like a dog catcher, because typically when you're arrested, you're sitting in the back of a seat. Why would you be put in something that's metal? That's in the back of like almost like they're stacked. And I'm like, that absolutely sit chills up my spine because I'm like, um, just the thought of a human being being treated that way. And so it's like
Yeah.
I'm willing to cut off anybody who doesn't really care about this, and that's why I've been so vocal about it on Twitter. And it's getting so crazy. This is how crazy it's getting, Arturo. Even beyond Latinos, there are Black people that are saying that are kind of like they're becoming anti-African. I've
Yeah,
never
I've seen
seen this
that.
in my life. Never seen it in my life. Where they're saying,
That's
where I
crazy.
tell them I use Black American and African American interchangeably, and that's a controversial statement now.
Yeah, I don't
Knowing damn
understand that.
well it wasn't.
Right, right. Yeah, it's so weird, because like in the '90s and stuff, there was all this stuff. It was pretty common. There was all the connection to Africa and things like
Right,
that. And that's when I in the '90s when I started learning about the Cuba connection to Africa and all these things,
right,
and I started reading books and the history of it, and started asking my family about it. And that's 5, 10 years later, I started meeting my Afro-Cuban family in Cuba, and talking and stuff. And it's like so cool because there's so many of them that like my grandfather just turned his back on because my grandfather was a piece of shit. And I'm
right,
just like, like I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And my mom is also shocked by it because she had no idea that it was.
right,
She knew that we had an Afro-Cuban side, but she didn't realize how big it was. And that's
right,
because like our family worked the fields alongside a lot of enslaved people, and like there's a lot of Black people in our family. That's all there is to it, and my grandfather, he's one of like a lot of Cubans in the US, they fled when Castro took over the whole Great White Flight out of Cuba, and that's who they are. That's who they were when they were
right.
in Cuba. That's who
It's
they are when they're
sad.
here. I
It's sad
know.
that they developed those, like, I'm glad that they left to go where they wanted to go, whatever, like, but at the same time, it's like them developing the negative attitudes. It kinda reminds me of, like, a lot of Black people who will get money or have privilege, like the light skin privilege thing, or, like, they'll just act like they're better than everybody else.
Yeah, yeah, I don't get
Sad.
it.
Well, Dr. Martin Luther King one time said they forget the stench of the backwater. Like they feel like they're so detached from that. And it's interesting because like in my family, I actually have, like one of my ancestors, he was born enslaved, my second great grandfather, but on my mom's side, my second great grandfather was up north and he came down south for the war to fight. And I thought that was interesting too, because I was like, what were you thinking? Like, you're lucky that you survived that. And but that's like an example of okay, I made it. I can stay free and just say, oh, it ain't my
Right,
problem. But the tradition in this country has been to say, you know what, if it's an injustice anywhere, it's a threat to justice anywhere. Like that has been like our vibe.
right.
And I feel like a lot of people, and it's crazy because it's happening across the political spectrum. You know, I'm seeing it happen because I didn't realize I was going to see so much stuff from even the center and where, people like center Dems, like some of them were espousing um xenophobia against Zohan. And,
Yeah,
and that really pissed me off because it was like, a lot of things got exposed. For one, I'm a progressive and I voted for Kamala Harris. And Kamala Biden, none of the people that kind of are more centrist were ever going to be my first choice. But I made what
right.
I felt like was a responsible choice. And that's not to diss anyone else's choice because I know lots of people that's like, you know what, I can't do it. Okay. But I do think that there was like a lot of people that felt like the blue no matter who stuff. I never did like it, and there was always people like
Yeah,
Fetterman I was never gonna get behind. But it's interesting because I feel like they exposed the fact that that was a lie. If blue no matter who was real, then y'all would be supporting Zohan, but y'all not. So it's kind of exposing that they wanted to bully us to let go of our values But in reality, they're not willing to even momentarily consider accepting our values when it's time. And so that's kind of disturbing as we go into the primary and as we're going to have a debate once again about who should be a candidate. And, we just saw really clearly how much they hate socialists, even though Dr. Martin Luther King was a socialist, how, even though they want to quote him and, all this. So
Right.
it's just interesting to me, like they kind of got exposed because they for a while they kind of had their reputation as we're the mature ones, we're doing what's mature. But to me it's like, nah, this ain't mature. Y'all being xenophobic because you don't like him, and on top of that, you are you're using this you're like, it's the Israel and Palestinian issue that kind of split us all up. And I feel like until we're really as a party or group of people willing to come together and acknowledge that the real split was on Palestine. Like,
Right.
and I think growth to me would look like, hey y'all, we should have took a more anti-Israel stance, and that's not against Jewish people, but the state of Israel is in the wrong, just like America so often is in the wrong. If someone is against America's geopolitical stance, I don't feel like they're against me as an American. They're against
Right.
the country and the powers that are doing these things. And, Netanyahu is a war criminal. South Africa
Right.
experienced apartheid and they said it was apartheid. And I feel like there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who were like, I'm not ready to say what that is over there. And it's like, you're not ready to say. I bet you if it was your family getting blown to pieces, you'd be ready to
Right.
say. You know what I
Right.
mean? And look at how they're doing Ilhan, Mr, and they didn't let a Palestinian speak at the Democratic National Convention. There were a lot of missteps. And I feel like what I see is the problem happening all over again is not being willing to acknowledge that it was a misstep, that there were missteps made?
Yeah. I think, a lot of that too, people saw, an ugly side of the Democratic Party when, they started seeing some losses with progressives, and tried to replace them with conservatives by parading people like Liz Cheney out there. Man, even the right hates Liz Cheney. Like, dude,
Yeah, enough with these
why
weird
would you?
conservatives.
Right, and you're throwing out sheriffs and cops
The
and
Democrats are going to keep losing if they don't go to the left. And I feel like this is why. Because there's simply not enough of these middle voters. The
yeah,
people, the Republicans know what direction they want to go in. Black people, immigrants, women, less rights. They all that, and they're going for it. So
yeah,
if you're just like, oh, we want to keep things the same, that's not inspiring people. People want to know that you are the modern day civil rights movement. If you are
right,
not going to be the modern day civil rights movement to reclaim our voting rights, reclaim all these things, get women our rights back. You talked about when I was growing up and I was younger, the Democratic Party used to always talk about pathway to citizenship. So all those types of things have to come back because if they don't, how are we going to ever beat a group of people that are organized and they do know what they want and they want Trump
right,
or someone like Trump, and they're very focused. I'm just worried that on the other side it's a lot of between the super left that won't vote and the sinners who won't support progressives, and they don't seem to understand that we're trying to save you guys. If you don't get someone like Zohan across, I mean, if you get him across, you're jamming up people that kind of want the system to be going all together. Either
right, and
progress is going to work or the system is going to be dismantled. And they need to kind of make up their mind because all this little middle of the road stuff is not going to be enough to get people to show up at the ballot box. I
right.
don't
And
think so.
when you have billionaires freaking out, you're doing the right thing. And I can't get over. I think it was the Wisconsin Supreme Court race where Elon Musk was putting a lot of money into, and then Governor Pritzker, he's billionaire too, was putting a bunch of money in. I think that's who it was, and the liberals or whoever the left won, Democrat won, and I seen Ana Navarro post on Twitter, "My billionaire beat your billionaire." I was like, "Girl, this is not a flex. This
I
is not a flex.
know.
You just
Not a
admitted
flex.
that you bought, this
Yikes.
election was paid for, right?" And I was just
Well,
like,
just like Trump was
"No,
paid for.
right? Like, no, dude, don't say this." So yeah, I, they're just not getting it. I don't think.
They're
And
not getting it. And
and
then
one,
I was so disappointed, like that, some of the Dems, are making like, okay, and then APAC. Oh my goodness. AIPAC makes it worse because it's like, okay, so you're more loyal to Israel than you are to helping us as Americans. And that's not cool because Israel doesn't need our help. I think that we
That's true.
shouldn't give not $1 to them because you're using it and you're bombing children, and you're bombing children that are running to try to get sacks of flour, and they're putting bad stuff in the flour. And it's just, no, we don't need to be putting out $1. Let them just, because, and if anything, that's the least we should do is stop giving them money. The most we should do is
Right.
stop them, literally physically stop them from being genocidal maniacs. But if we're not going to do that, then the least we can do is stop giving them money to help them do that. And I feel like, you know, Democrats lucked up and were on the right side of things when it came to the Black Lives Matter movement. But what we're starting to realize is that they're better on civil rights than they are on human rights. They're not
Yeah.
human rights
Right.
activists. And that's the problem. This is a moment internationally where we're going to need more human rights activists to step up that actually care, not just if it's the person that I share an identity with, but everyone, and I think that's what it's going to have to come down to.
Right. I agree. I just it one of the things that's always irritated me about Israel is how we send them billions of dollars and they have universal health care
That makes
and
me so
we
mad.
don't. That burns me really, really bad, because
But
I'm
yeah, we're called radical if we believe in Medicare for all. We
right,
believe in state government health care. We're evil, but we can pay for an entire another country's people. Everyone there that's an Israel citizen gets to go to the doctor for free because of our tax dollars. The tax dollars they take out of our check. Like that, like what is going on?
right, and how expensive is it really when a cash poor country like Cuba has universal health care and
Right. I
free
feel like we
housing
definitely
and
could do we definitely could,
right,
and we definitely have to find a way to do it.
yeah, like, but, like, the National Assembly in Cuba, and I gotta mention this because it's another example. They started, they're in session, like, a couple of days ago. The first thing they did was they voted in favor of doubling seniors' pensions to help deal with inflation. That was the first thing they did for day one in their legislature. And I'm like, why can't we do that? You know what I mean?
People are
Like,
patriots.
right, can we all agree that old folks
We
need
don't
more
really
money?
have true patriots. We don't have a lot of people in
Right.
Congress or in power that actually love all Americans. And I just said that, I just tweeted that earlier, kind of messing with people. I said, y'all not really patriots if you don't want Black Americans to thrive, because why wouldn't you want your fellows? If you're serious about loving America, then that wouldn't just exclude Black Americans and Latino Americans and Asian Americans. You would love us all. But the fact of the matter, you don't love us all. Like they're not patriots. And so when you put people in office that are not patriots and don't give a damn about anyone but white rich people, that's not patriotism, that's white supremacy. And
Right.
so that's the problem. We actually need
Right.
the real patriots and human rights activists to step up. And even people like, what's his name, Hakeem Jeffries. I was so disappointed because I definitely, before a lot of this, he was one of the people that I was like, okay, I could see you as a solid leader. But his just inability to support, I'm like, are you too, like, I'm thinking to myself, are you too much of a moderate? Are you too much beholden to the mainstream of the Democratic Party? And that's disappointing because that's not what I wanted him to be, but I don't get to decide who he is. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
He does.
comes across as center right. And
But it used to
every
be different. Am I
I
tripping?
know.
He used to be center left. He
Right.
used to be somebody that was like criminal justice reform, this, that, the other.
Right, right.
And now, I feel like I don't know it seems like this, like when it comes to Israel, like that's a real problem in the
In
Democratic Party right
Congress.
now, because
Yeah.
some of the people, it feel like almost like the Israel thing is what pushed them to the right. Because I'm trying to see what else it was. We was all together in 2020, 5 years ago, talking about expanding, getting the Voting Rights Act passed, getting George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed. Cory Booker had wrote the Second Step Act. He helped co-author the First Step Act to try to end mass incarceration. We had Black leaders that were actually, that were in Congress that were advocating for very much to the left policies. And now it's just like, you guys, like, just shut up about all that. Don't talk about defund the police. Don't talk
Right.
about any of it, really. Don't
Don't
talk
talk
about
about
anything
all the stuff.
racialized. Like, they
Right.
capitulated.
they wanted to stop. They want us to stop talking about all the stuff Biden won on. Biden didn't say defund the police, but he did like embrace a lot of the
Support the
policies
Black Lives
behind.
Matter movement.
Right. He was asylum was a human right. You know, he wasn't going to do anything, you
That's
know,
true.
to take away asylum. And then in office, he restricted asylum twice. And it's
Right.
because he surrounded himself with a bunch of Republicans on his
And that's
staff.
about he was trying to be too conciliatory. And for
Right.
example,
Right.
I like that he was willing to sign a George Floyd Justice of Policing Act, which was a
Yeah.
to the left policy, and he did sign an executive order using the same language of that bill on a federal level. So when he lost in the Congress, he did what he could with the pen.
Right.
But then he undid that during COVID when he decided to give cops more money while
30.
activists were saying defund the police.
Yeah.
So it's like it was kind of like you can tell he had people around him and everybody like the Democratic it's like almost like the Democratic Party was having an identity crisis and that what he did is a more reflective of that identity crisis than anything
Right.
else.
I
You
agree.
know,
I think
when it came to
it was more focused on just trying to shut down the Biden is the defund the police guy. He's like, "No, I'm not. I'm gonna refund the police." And I'm like,
yeah. He
"They were
went too
never
hard in the
defunded."
opposite direction. That's the same thing Bill
Right.
Clinton did. That's the
Right.
thing Bill Clinton
Right.
and Biden did in the 90s. Because remember, that's how they got the crime bill. Michael Dukakis lost. And when he lost, Republicans said, you're soft on crime. You're soft on
Mhm.
crime. So the Democrats wanted to say, we're hard on crime. No, it's like they're so weak. You need to be able to have a stance, not always be reacting. And that's the problem. They were reacting to the accusation that they were soft on crime. So they came up with a crime bill that absolutely made all of Black people's lives worse. And so
Right.
that's the problem. We don't need no fools that are going to get bullied into making this country worse. We don't need conciliatory. We don't want to be conciliatory. Our population is greater than their population. Black, Latino, Asian, and all the different mixed people. White people are already the minority if we consider ourselves together on certain
Right.
issues. And
Right.
that's why there's a lot of interest in trying to get us to see each other as separate because it's like, oh no, don't show up right now because if you show up now, it's for the Latinos. Like there was a lot of people that
Right.
made it seem like that when in reality, the things that help Latinos would help us because less money for ICE, less money for police. Like the police don't need more money.
No.
They don't keep us safe, and
No.
that's the bottom line. We were
Yeah,
right.
it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well, I know it's 5. Think you had to leave at 5, right?
Yeah, I need to go bring my little puppy to the vet. She has something in her eye. They said it's a cornea.
No.
Every 6 hours, I have to put eye drops in her eye, and now it's
She's
a
not
week since
she's only like
right?
what? She's 2? How old is your
She's 2.
dog?
Yeah, she's 2. She turned 3
Yeah.
in December, but now she has a cornea in her eye, and so
Man.
they
Mm.
have to go check it again. They have to put this special stuff in her eye, and then they look to see if it's fixed or not. But I've been putting the gel in there and just hoping for the best. But she hasn't been opening that eye all the way, so it's
No.
just terrifying. And so I'm about to go to the vet hospital before they close, and I got an appointment. But I'm hoping me and you could do this again maybe next week or
Yeah,
something because this was
for sure.
really fun. I miss talking to you. I miss
Same.
talking to you all the time.
Same.